Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my God of War, Chains of Olympus, Pain plus no damage run. So this is the beginning of the City of Marathon, and we're taking on our first Shade. And these enemies are going to be replacing the hoplites that we were killing in the last game, I think they were called, those Persian enemies we were fighting, which are hoplites, I believe. They're the same kind of enemy tier. I could be wrong again, guys. I'm getting names from the wikis and, you know, I don't know everything. But this I do know. When this enemy does that move where they rear up and charge you, you can grab them in between the string. You have to be quick though. You have to block the first hit, grab, and then put them down. And it's the best way to shut down their shenanigans, because this enemy is very aggressive. But I'm going to open up the start there by doing the Spirit of Hercules to try and hit them as hard as I can, and then I'm going to prioritize the archers. If you know anything about God of War, archers generally exist to make your life miserable. And in this game, you don't get the opportunity to throw them, which is unfortunate, because the archers are essentially a rocket launcher in God of War 1, because the collision on them is insane. But in this game, Kratos just straight up executes them. So always get rid of archers, and then go from there and do what you can do. And a couple of things to bear in mind here, guys, as we take on our first Banshee, I believe these enemies are called. And they're being birthed by that dark mist. And this enemy is a hybrid of a Gorgon and a Siren, I think is what it's meant to be. And she fights a lot like a Gorgon that has the ability to stun you with this move right here. You want to respect that as well, because it's a pain in the ass. But she does a 2-hitting tail combo, and hopefully if you can get her to land in the Ascension, you'll be able to knock her up. And once you knock her up, I think you can pretty much just destroy her with all the standard Orion Harpoon grab shenanigans. But I think you have to kill 2 of these. And get comfortable killing them as well, because one of the things that you learn a lot about these games is when you come up against a new enemy, they'll populate a fight later on with that enemy with additional monsters. And if you don't have the comfortability with them, you're going to start to really struggle. That being said, if you're going to try and do any kind of no upgrade run or pain run and you don't have any kind of confidence with the enemies, you're going to struggle anyway, because this is not the hardest God of War game, but it'll kick your ass if you're used to modern gaming. It looks so funny though coming back to this after doing a lot of God of War 1, because it's so different. It really is different. But I think they did a fantastic job of giving us this experience. And it must be said, guys, I gave 2018 a chance. I really tried to like it, but it just isn't for me. And I like these games, you know? And when I came back to this game, it was just a breath of fresh air to be back in what I call God of War. But we got a couple of archers here. I think these might be the Shade archers, these ones, but they go down in one execution, which is really nice. It's a beautiful animation too. And then the mechanic here is they want you to push the cart, I believe. But before you can do this, you have to pick up this flaming torch. And this flaming torch is going to be put into the back of that hay bale. And then there's going to be some enemies that are going to mess with us. And if you do this too quickly, the archers will shoot you. So you need to go and clear them out. That's why I did that. And the idea with archers, guys, is if you hold your block, you're usually safe. You want to keep them off screen as much as you physically can. And if you can get close enough to attack them with a light attack, if you hit them with a square, you'll interrupt their knocking. And then you can go in there and kill them with a grab. But every so often, they're going to spawn archers here. So try and hit them with something if you can. Do not grab this for too long, though. I don't know why I'm rolling this much. This seems like a bit of a panic situation. Maybe you can't block their arrows. It's been a while since I recorded this. But I just need to stun him, and then when I launch him, I can Orion's Harpoon him, and then I can finish him off. And then as you push it forward, one will spawn on the right here. I really wish we could get the original 3 God of Wars and the PSP God of Wars on PC. I think that would be really, really cool. Because then it would open the doors to all kind of mods and things, and enemy randomizers, and, you know, additional rebalances of the game. Like, can you imagine how cool that would be and all the life it would add to a series that already has tons of replay value? But bounce him, harpoon him, and then get on with your life. This is one of the rare sequences where you will see more than just combat, and the reason is because there's enemies spawning when this happens. And then I believe at the end of this we come up against our first, I think it's a Dark Beast. I know that the enhanced version of it is called a Sphinx. Oh no, it's a Morpheus Beast, isn't it? It's a Dream Beast. So I think this is the worst enemy in the game. I fucking hate it. And I hate it because it's boring. It's like the Cyclops of Chains of Olympus. And all you do is you mash on his face with whatever attacks you like to do, and then when he hunches down, you block him. And if you try to do anything exotic in this fight, he gets distance and jumps on you. And his jumping attack deals damage too, which is really lame. So it leads you to a situation of you can either try and jump the grab or roll it with really awkward timing, or you can be super aggressive and he tends to favour not doing it, but whenever he moves backwards like that, it usually means the Morpheus Beast wants to jump on top of you. And if you see him dash, you can use a combination of plumes here and a combination of standard strikes. And later on, when you fight the Sphinx, you'll learn how to optimize this monster a lot. But I didn't have it on that fight, hence why it wasn't so quick. But what I like to do in the later fights is I like to do square combos leading towards Plume of Prometheus. And if he jumps to the side, you can hit him with a plume and stun him. If he attacks, you block. And all you do is you loop Plume of Prometheus's until you have to inevitably block. And if you do that, you speed him up a ton. But this is some shades with a Banshee. And again, guys, block that first hit, grab the second. However, if you're out of position or you're too slow, you will trade. So do not do it lightly. Only do it when you know you're going to get away with it, because there's no point in taking the risk. And in this fight, you're pretty much safe to block almost everything that's happening here. There's nothing that's going to do too much to you. I don't think any of these enemies can guard break. The Banshee Call might still hit you, but you can just roll that quickly. And then all I do here is I try to get the launch on her. And I'll alternate between square triangle into some ascension attempts, into some standard triangles, into maybe a plume, into a bounce. And once you get an enemy bouncing, that's when you can start doing all kinds of combos. But I started going there for a Spirit of Hercules, because I thought there was another wave, and there wasn't. But now we're introduced to the Dark Satyrs. Moving into this next sequence here, which is, I believe this is a temple. I'm going to be splitting this video up, guys, so if I don't have an intro on this one, you'll know why. But this enemy, at first, is kind of annoying. And then you realise that they're really susceptible to being looped in the air on grabs. One thing that I don't appreciate, though, is the Grenadier variant. There is one that throws bombs at you, and that enemy, dude, was designed by Satan. That enemy is the most frustrating thing I'd faced in the game up to that point, and I was getting really mad at it. But again, one of the things I learnt by banging my head against that monster is they throw the bombs where you're going, not where you are. So you can bait their throws by moving one direction, and as soon as they do it, immediately snapping to the other direction, and you'll get usually out of its radius. But a really good strategy on these enemies that you won't see me do until a bit later is jumping triangle. So square triangle into looping Orion's Harpoon is really strong. If this was God of War 1, I'd be hurting these guys with the hits coming down, and I really missed that in this game because it's so much fun. But any kind of launch on this enemy is going to be really useful because it can lead to this, and when you do this, you're completely safe. It's not like the other games where you can get jump attacked immediately. And additionally, the Satyr's moveset in this game, because he's using the Voldo knives, you can grab him between his strings. And you could do that to the Satyrs in the original game, which is interesting, but those guys are way worse than these guys. These guys, especially when you can keep them off screen, aren't too bad. The only reason this fight will give you any difficulty is because later on they start bringing in Grenadiers, and those guys, they ruin everything. And because they're elusive and evasive, sometimes you try to launch them and you don't get it. But all I'm doing here is I'm doing some camera manipulation until I see those other guys turn up. And when those other guys turn up, I'm going to focus them and just try and get rid of them. And it's up to you what you do, guys. You can do jump throw loops, or you can do Orion's Harpoon loops. It's entirely your preference. I like to use Orion the most because I tend to do combos in between. And I don't like to grab them like that too much because it's very easy to mess up those circular inputs. But here's the... Did you see him just then? As soon as I noticed he had grenades, I backed away. So now I'm going to use the light attack to jab him to stop him doing things, so I can cover the distance and then grab him. And now that I've flinched him enough to get close, I can just loop him with Orion. And then this guy's on his own, and because we've got no one on camera, I can engage him, so I'm going to do it. But did you see the hitboxes? Dude, the fucking hitboxes on these enemies is terrible. They hit you from about 2 meters away. That's one of the only things I don't like about this game. Like, I've come back to it and I really appreciated it and super enjoyed it, but the hitboxes, man. Nowhere near as bad as, like, the fucking Wraith hitbox in God of War 1, though. Dude, some of those hitboxes are just a nightmare. And that's really useful, too. Did you see that? The one good thing about the Satyr Grenadier is he can hurt other people. And you can use that. And it's so funny, because when I was doing this fight, when I was recording it, I thought this was a pain in the ass. I had no idea what was coming. Because I'd never beaten the game before, so I was just like, I can do this. And then later on, that Sphinx fight, that double Sphinx fight with these guys, by far the worst fight in the game for me, except for Persephone. And it's just because I just hated it, and I kept getting physics problems. And this dude, whoever designed this part of the game, they just wanted to make your day the worst possible day you could have. Like, trying to pull switches while people bomb you, that's the most God of War 1 thing I can even think of. It reminds me of turning that crank while the archers shoot you. You know, it reminds me of moving that soldier in the cage up that bloody lane with those stupid Legionnaire guys. Unbelievable nonsense. But here is me cutting to me killing these assholes. This enemy fucking sucks. It absolutely sucks, I hate it. I would straight up delete it because I don't think it adds anything. It's just cheesy. But luckily, it's easy to kill, and the more you fight it, the more comfortable you'll get, and hopefully, you won't have the issues that I had, because for some reason, this enemy did mental damage to me. Like, I don't even know what it was. Nothing in this game pissed me off but those guys. And these guys are fire sentries. And they have a really interesting jumping attack, which I like a lot, because you can walk around it and then fuck them up. Which I very much appreciate. But one of the things you'll find really quickly in God of War when you do a restricted run and you don't have all the combos, I love that animation, dude, is that learning the timing of when to grab with Orion and when to jump grab and things and the vacuum and all of that, there's such a nuance to it and a subtlety that I really didn't appreciate until I went to God of War 1. That's interesting, that guard breaks, did you see that? So whenever Kratos goes down on his knee like that, it means that you are completely vulnerable. If anybody decides to attack you, you're in trouble. However, a lot of the times when it happens, the enemies give you a bit of a grace period, so it's not usually too much of an issue. In some of the later games, that would absolutely be an issue, but in this one, not so much. But this fight's kind of interesting if you don't understand how to fight the Hyperion guards. So I ended up doing this about 3 times, because when I got to the bottom, I didn't realise you could block that monster. I thought you had to evade him like a Cyclops, and I ended up getting caught because I wasn't very good at fighting them yet. However, you can pretty much block everything he does, and if you parry, which many people seem to, you can just parry everything he does as well, so it's not a big deal. But you have to take on a lot of fire sentries even to get there, and this guy's real good at guard breaking. You can get into a crazy melee like this, or, more importantly, you could use Orion to loop them and pacify them, or any of the aerial grabs. But one of the best ways to fight them, I found, was to corral them together and keep them all, like, launched in plumes. But I'm not doing a very good job of it here. You'll see it a little bit later on when I'm a bit better. But they all bounce, and if you can get them all bouncing, you can control them in just general crowd control. But you just have to be very careful and respect the armor of that jump, because unless you parry it, it will guard break, and if you don't use movement or dodging, you might get yourself into a bad situation. That being said, the roll in this game is really generous. It's very iframey, it's super, like, portable. They definitely wanted to help us out. And the Mighty Plume of Prometheus, which is by far my favourite move in the series. It's all I used to do back when I was first playing the game, because it's just so good. Is it optimal all the time? Absolutely not. But sometimes it's just really fun. And because the music's so good, you just don't mind all the slamming and all the crashing and all the bombast. Because you can kill these a lot quicker and a lot safer if you just use the Orion's Harpoon. But you're going to be seeing a lot of grabbing in this run, so I wanted to give you a little bit of something else as well. And it's fun, you know, it's fun using Kratos' moveset. It'd be nice if we got a couple more options, but in this particular one, you are very limited. But it's funny, because as limited as you are, you're really good. You know, this guy is a wrecking machine. He doesn't need much to win. And then if you wait here, this guy turns up, and it's your first introduction to him. So if you hit him with any of the plumes, you'll break his shield, and then he starts swinging. And all of this move here is all completely blockable, so you don't even have to do anything to it. You can imagine trying to roll away from this in this tiny room. Not the easiest thing to do. But he gets his shield back, so we're just going to keep on hitting with him strings and then blocking his combo. And I can't remember if there's 2 of these guys, or if it's just 1. But it's super intimidating, and then you realise there's just nothing to it. And I should be doing square triangle here. Square triangle would have stacked more damage, but I'm going for like Valor Dreams or Spirit Dreams, and I'm just not getting them. But it is interesting to see enemies that have got 1 move. And technically this guy does have some other stuff he can do, but in this particular engagement, he really likes to do that swing, 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 spin move. And I'd love to see a new God of War in this style. I'd love to see a new God of War portable as well. Can you imagine if they made another one? But they can't, can they? They've put themselves into a corner with this new direction, and because this new direction is so commercially successful and so critically acclaimed, they'll never make a God of War like this again. But here are a couple more fire sentries, or fire guards, I forget which ones they are. And again, you can bounce them, you can use the juggles to keep them in control. But do you see how he's going to jump at me, and when I use Orion's Harpoon, he completely stops what he's doing? It's fascinating to see something so blatant as that. It is a complete pacification. And I like it too, because it guarantees that you don't get meated when you come out of iframes. And there's a lot of games I've been playing lately where you're in an animation and you're safe, and as soon as you come out of it, you get one-framed by perfect spacing. And that shit never feels good, dude. It always feels annoying. Speaking of annoying, now we have a couple of Shade Archers with a Morpheus Beast. And this game's kind of weird, isn't it, story-wise, when you think about it? Because you do all this engagement with Morpheus, and then I don't think you ever see him. And if you did, I missed him. Like, you see some other people, they introduce, like, Persephone, they introduce some of the other characters, but this Morpheus guy is just not really here. The closest we come to him is Smoke. But we're going to do the same thing here, guys. We're going to just keep looping square combos on this enemy, baiting his punch. And as long as he punches, we're fine. And I think in this fight, later on, some archers turn up to make it a bit fucking more awkward. But fundamentally, it's really basic, it's really simple, and it's really boring. And I want to talk about that because I like God of War. It's one of my favourite action series. But I don't like boring, and I have a very low tolerance for it too. So, certain encounters, like this one, and admittedly, you can argue that I'm not hitting this boss with optimized combos, and I can accept that critique. But like, I like the challenge in a challenge run to be a challenge. I don't want it to just simply be a test of patience. And in this project, I didn't really feel like outside of a couple of encounters, it was much of a test of patience. It seemed like interesting combat problems to solve. It seemed like here was this formula that needed to be rearranged, and then when you came out on top, there was some execution, there was some knowledge, there was some insight, and it was fun. Certain fights aren't like that. You know, certain fights are just really, really miserable. Especially in God of War 1. God of War 1, some of the HP pools on some of the enemies is absurd. And I really don't understand why the life is so high. Because one of the things I think they changed in God of War 2 is they made some of the enemies die a little bit quicker. Or at least it felt like it. And maybe that's because the collision was really powerful, or in that game maybe you did more damage. I don't know what it was. Somebody way more learned than me knows these answers. But what I do remember is God of War 2 is my favourite game in the series because it always felt like even at its worst, you still were quite close to killing things. And of course, you know, if you did like general Kratos stuff and you did the restriction runs under those criteria, things took a lot longer. But I feel like they just made it feel a lot more streamlined and a lot more fun. And speaking of stuff that takes a long time to die. So believe it or not, this is a Minotaur in the PSP games. It's a lot closer to a Cyclops than anything else. It does not fight like the Minotaurs we know and exploit. And the idea of him is if you do any move that has an impact on him, such as a plume, he has this programmed response to charge you. And you can use it to get out of the way of it and punish him, and you can just keep looping charges if you want to. But there's also another manipulation on him that you're seeing right here, where if you're aggressive, he likes to headbutt you. And the headbutt comes out quite quick, but because the roll is so iframe heavy, you can just roll around him and beat him up. And it all depends on what you want to do. You can do square squares to make it safe so you don't have to add any complexity. You can do square triangles so you can add some damage and speed it up. You can just do plumes if you want to. And his charge move can be dodged by double jumping at the right timing. So you can stay in his face if you want to and do tons of damage to him. And we're going to fight a bunch of those enemies throughout this project. And sometimes you have to fight multiple in a row. So it is beholden to you to get good at killing them as expediently and as comfortably as possible. Because when I first fought that monster, I played like a coward. I just ran away from it, but it takes too long. We only have level 1 blades because we cannot upgrade. We can't use any of the other weapons, like is it the Fist of Zeus, which is really strong. So we have to be as optimized or at least as comfortable and as quick as we can be to win. And that's kind of this is it right here, guys. This is when I noticed Jump Triangle was so good at bouncing these little guys. And I'd completely forgotten about that if I ever knew it to begin with. So you should see me do that a couple times now. And just look how you can keep these guys in the air. It's really fun. I really like the enemies in this game. Like then you could have thrown him. Did you see the gap in his string just then? Always watch to see how long you have in between the hits when you're blocking because it's your turn. And one of the problems with God of War when people complain is usually that they're not taking their turn when they should do. And then this sequence here, again guys, I thought doing this voided Pain Plus, even though I've seen people on YouTube make Pain Plus runs who are doing this to actual bosses and enemies, you know? You know these people, they're really good players, and yet they're using it, so I don't know if you can do this without doing this, but I couldn't figure out a way, so I'm going to put that little warning just so people know, guys. I didn't want to do this. I'm doing everything I can not to do this. That's the whole point. But alas, sometimes, you know, the sisters of fate that we murdered get their way anyway. And this is one of, I think it's 2 sequences where you have to do that. And then this leads to a sequence of lots of fights against these fire guys. And this is when I realized how powerful keeping them launched was. Because you can do square combos into a plume, into ascension, and then they'll just all get launched, and if you line them up, you can keep them all, just look at this. And then you can do all kinds of crazy just juggle hits on them, and there's nothing they can do because you're so strong, and they're not. And this is what I love about God of War. This is what I miss in the new games. You never feel like this in the new games, you know? Because the throws aren't good enough. You can't grab dudes, you can't put them in situations like this where you carry an entire room of enemies and there's nothing they can do because you're using all the knowledge that you've developed. You're using all the systems that the games have built on. Like, it's fun. Look at this, dude. Just complete crowd control with nothing but bouncers and OTGs. Like, this is cool. And that's one of the reasons when I came back I had so much fun. Because when I first played Chains of Olympus, I quit it because I was bored. I quit it because it felt like fucking like God of War for kids, you know, and I know that sounds really condescending and insulting, and it is. This is a great game, and I really appreciate it now, but a couple of years back when I tried to play it, I was just like, wow, there's no enemies in this game, and you can just grab the whole time, like, what's going on? This is lame. But it's funny, isn't it? You know, when you miss video games, and you miss engaging with video games, and actually doing mechanical things, you come back to something like this, and all the platforming's streamlined, all the puzzles are streamlined, you don't have half the amount of gimmick fights that you have in some of the other God of Wars, where there's a floor that's going to fall through, or some spikes are going to hit you, or some bullshit flamethrowers are going to one-touch you. Like, once you remove that, you just get pure combat, and I really love that. Because, you know, I played God of War for spectacle. I played God of War for the Tomb Raider experience in Pandora's Temple and everything. Now I'm playing for the murder. I'm playing for the butchery. I want to come in here and I want to cause chaos. Like, look how fun this room is. So these are harpies, right? There's versions of harpies. There's harplings. These might be harplings because they look kind of small. But there's lots of flying douchebags in this game. And what you can do to them, as you see here, is you can hit them with a square, and then if you press grab, you will do like a vacuum grab to them. And it's almost like a hit confirm, and it has lots of range. Look at that, dude. And you can kind of do this in God of War 1, but it doesn't work the same, and you whiff a lot. But in this game, you have absolute priority when you throw. And this entire elevator is a popcorn sequence. And if you're unfamiliar with that terminology, I think it comes from shmups. And if you've never played shmups, you should, because they're amazing. They have some of the greatest mechanics in any video game, and they're incredibly hard. But the idea is, they give you enemies that die quick, so that you can have a satisfying feeling of feeling powerful. You know, not every enemy has to take 5,000 hits. Sometimes it's nice to kill something quickly, right? Ah, these are the other ones. So there's fire guards and there's fire sentries. These guys throw things at you. These are the other version. And they've, of course, got this Hyperion guard with them. And, oh, that's something I need to talk about as well. Once I finish the topic of popcorn. Popcorn enemies are some of the best designed because they enable you to have some fun in between the big moments. Every so often, a player needs to be reminded that they're the fucking hero, you know? And that's why popcorn is so effective, and I think this game does it really well. But what happened just then, for the people who have never played the PSP versions of God of War, that console, that handheld, did not have 2 analogs. So the conventional rolling system had to be adjusted. And they adjusted it by making you hold 2 bumpers, which I think was a pretty elegant solution. I would have preferred it if you held 1 bumper, because I think it should have been that when you hold block while not touching the analog, you just block. But if you move the left analog while holding block, I think you should have rolled, and I think that would have just been a cleverer system. Because what ends up happening, every so often, is when you hold right bumper, you access magic. And of course, on this run you can't use magic. And there are some times when you try to roll really quickly and you press both of the bumpers and then you roll, you will accidentally use the magic. It only happened to me twice, and I'm not going to complain about it because it was my fault. You know, I must have pressed them in a wrong order or like not quite done them at the same time. It was player error. But the fact that it can happen is not ideal, because it's not what you want, you know. You don't really want to be victim to an input error that is because the control scheme is kind of limited. So if you ever see that kind of lock-on, guys, you know, like the Medusa's gaze lock-on, if you ever see that, it's not intentional. It's just that I've held that before I held block, apparently, and it got in the way of the cancel. And this game does have the faster rolling as well if you want to do the roll cancels. And all you do, guys, is the same in the other God of Wars. When you're holding the roll, if you mash the attack button, or if you press it in certain intervals, it depends on how you want to do it, you will speed up Kratos' recovery by attacking and then cancelling his attack with a roll. And this is a fundamental strategy to get better at God of War, because if you don't use it, you are going to be beholden to a lot of dangerous moves. However, one of the things you'll notice in my footage that I've been trying my best to do is I try to avoid being too roll or too block heavy. I want to use as much movement as I can, but a lot of the times you kind of can't. And it's just because I like the idea of moving around attacks rather than just using iframes or just holding block. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to block and I'm not going to roll, of course. It just means that if I can come up with something creative to circumvent it, I want to try and show it if I can. And the hitboxes in this game are good enough that it usually lets me do that. But we have 2 Banshees here, and multiple of the shade archers, so we need to be really careful. If this was in another game, this would be so much fun because we could use the archers to kill these enemies. But because it's this, I have to be really cognizant of her doing the scream. And all you do is you interrupt them and flinch them with plumes. And if you can, you launch them. Because if you launch them, you can get a free grab, and the grabs always do seemingly a lot of damage. I don't know how much damage they do, but I know it must be good, because, you know, God of War is built on Kratos grabbing the shit out of people. And additionally, you can flinch them with triangle sometimes, which is handy. And I don't remember ever really using square triangle that much when I used to play these games back in the day casually, but it's definitely become easily my most go-to move, because it's like sticking out a jab as a boxer, isn't it? You do a heavy move, you do a launching move, and if it hits and if it bounces, you react. If it doesn't, you block, and you cancel the recovery. And it's such a good tool. And then right here, I didn't want to risk this because I'm at the end of the fight, so I didn't do any of the grab interruptions. But it is interesting, isn't it, that when you press triangle, the move is a 2-hitting heavy move, but it's quite slow on its startup. Yet if you press square triangle, it seems to come out faster. And I haven't measured it in my editing software, but I get the feeling that that's intentional, and I don't really know why. So if anybody has an answer for that, I'm curious. Is that meant to be... Is it meant to be something to incentivize you doing combos or something? There's the scream, but I stunned her so she didn't do it. There's the 2-hit. There's me going for the big boy, the Spirit of Hercules, and that's the end of the Banshee. Really violent sequence here. It's a good job Adam Sessler wasn't around, or he would have tried to get this banned as well.